So we're back at it again.
We're
What is going
back.
on?
Uh, just hanging out. It's been a little rainy and windy. The cloudiness makes me tired, so I feel like I need to have a nap. So
Hmm.
I just made a second coffee, and then I found these at the Costco, and I'm digging them.
What's that?
The Lipton green tea citrus iced tea.
Interesting. Okay.
Trying to load up caffeine here, so although I think the green tea's pretty low in caffeine.
Nice. I
I
think
don't
our
know.
conversation today will kind of get you fired
Fire
up
it
again.
up. All
Yeah,
right.
I think
All
it's a
right.
good one. Yeah,
Sounds good.
it's been sunny here all week. It's been nice. We've had the windows open. It's been great. But there's a storm coming in this weekend. Apparently, there's like a tropical storm kind of heading right toward where we're at, like our
Mm.
general area. And I was supposed to run a 10-mile race on um, Sunday, but that's looking iffy at the moment. Or if not, it's going to happen. I'm going to be running in the rain
You know,
again. Um,
it might be fun.
I've I've done it. I've done it's down at the shore, and I've done the half marathon the last 2 years. This year, I'm just like not quite ready for a half marathon because I hit the wall at mile 10, and like when I hit the wall, I hit the wall hard.
Hmm.
So I decided to do the 10-miler this year and see how I feel. And last year was rough with the wind and the rain, and so they made it a week earlier this year, and it still seems like it's going to rain. So we'll see.
Well, best of luck with that. Hopefully, you don't get rained out and you
Thank
have a
you.
strong showing.
Yeah. Oh, did I lose you?
Nope, I'm here.
Okay. All of a sudden, it looked like the screen froze too.
I was watching that on. Have you seen that reel on Instagram? I'll have to send it to you. Where they're doing it's like six people and they're in a team meeting and the one guy like freezes and then it's like, oh, does someone else want to jump in for it? It's like, yeah, I got this, and then the other guy starts talking and he like freezes, but his ceiling fan is going. He's like, come on, Brad, you idiot, your ceiling fan is still spinning. Anyway, like
Oh no, I haven't seen that
it's
one.
pretty funny. I'll
Yeah,
find it and
send
send
that
it to
to
you.
me. That's
Yeah, it's a
good.
good one. It's a good one.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, I'm trying to think of a pivot to our conversation this week, but not really.
Sometimes it just has to be an abrupt
Just
shifting of gears.
yeah. Um, so I want to talk about something which I mean this is not a new idea. It's something we've seen for forever, but it's come up recently with two different clients that we work with. And so when you're hiring an agency, I'll kind of get right to it. It's understanding why, and we've talked about this before, like why you hire, say, a consultant versus a contractor,
Yeah.
but understanding why and um, understanding why you're hiring the agency will help identify if this is happening. So the idea of working with partners or agencies that do certain things that make you dependent upon them. So the concept of vendor lock-in. So like I said, it's nothing new, and it's not even unique to our industry. It's a tactic deployed across many different industries, both on the B2B side versus the B2C side. Um, and basically, with this tactic, what you see is organizations that you've partnered with, building features, implementing processes that in some ways are proprietary and make you completely dependent upon them. So any kind of attempts to switch out partners comes at tremendous cost. Um, what's been your experience with this on the digital analytics agency side?
I mean, it definitely exists. And I think the first thing to recognize in this isn't looking for any sympathy for us or any other agency owners, but running an agency is really, really difficult. Um, Being able to predict future revenues, and obviously you want to, well, most agencies want to develop long-term relationships with their clients, but then you're in this tough spot of, do we purposefully keep them immature so they're relying on us, or do we trust in our skills and services to take them to other levels and get them more and more elite? And we've kind of chosen that latter version, and the type of customers that we want to work with are the ones that want to be the most elite. And I think we've talked about the analogy of, Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, etc., at the top of their game, still had a coach. And, you get, it's not like you get to the top of your game and you don't need a coach anymore. And so that's the way we've kind of looked at it. Others have not. And in order to ensure kind of a long term livelihood with a client, rather than focusing on being kind of a coach that helps their clients get to an elite level, and it's often, but I don't want to say it's the majority there, but there are a handful of agencies that choose tactics that lock their clients into their ecosystem. And whether that's through software, through licensing, we've seen this. This happens, or used to happen quite a bit on the Google side, where the agency actually owned the Google accounts for their clients. And I said, well, if you leave, you lose all your data because we own your accounts. Or it could be through proprietary systems or softwares. I remember, oh geez, maybe this was 8 years or so ago. We worked with a client that was deeply, deeply dependent on an agency because they were processing all of their data. And it was this hidden system that didn't, they had no idea how it worked, what it did, how it was manipulating the data. And I think that was by design because they couldn't walk away. And so it does happen. And not to say there are times where it's not so by design. There may be times where there is some lock in and it just kind of organically happens, but I think more often than not it's absolutely by design. Create these systems, processes, software, contractual, what have you, where the whole design is to lock customers in. And it's just a red flag, right? And it's like with any other things in life. If you're getting locked into some kind of long-term thing that you can't get out of, or you're highly dependent on with no more options, it should raise some questions around, is this the right thing for me? um, and a lot of times it's not. I think this this kind of mentality to me set in really, really early when I was in college. I think I was looking at joining a local gym, and one gym had like, a month to month contract, one had like a year contract, and this one gym had like a 4 year contract. And I'm like, what the hell? And the one that had the 4 year contract was the dumpiest piece of crap. Like, people were unhappy, but they didn't care, right? They had really good salespeople that locked people into this system and they couldn't get out, and so they had their money. So, not to say that there isn't value to having kind of long term commitments, but if you're purposefully creating something to keep someone locked in, it should be a red flag, especially in the analytics landscape when dealing with vendors. You should have the opportunity to move around if that is available to you.
Yeah, so two things where I saw this happen most recently is with a client where we're providing more of a mentoring and advisory level of service, where our primary stakeholder wants his team to be leveled up so they can own as much as possible. And that's one of the reasons why he partnered with us is because we're going to do exactly that. We're going to put them in the position to own it, and us guide it. But he's also highly dependent upon another business unit that went an opposite direction. So they've recently replatformed, and actually by recently I mean within the last 2 years, and they hired another agency to do the heavy lifting of the implementation. But one of the things we learned recently is that there are certain functions that they've labeled utilities that they've built into the tag manager, which the other business unit and the agency have an agreement where the agency will be the only ones to update it. And I mean, it was just a massive red flag. So I went to our stakeholder saying, this is a problem. If you're in a way beholden to the other business unit and they made this decision, like they've built something that they need to own, and that's just massive red flag. That's a huge problem. And he agreed, like he saw it too. He saw through it and was like, no, I don't want to be beholden to them. I want my team to own it. And so the second part of that, and this is always something where I felt like I've been missing something throughout my career because I have worked for other organizations where they didn't quite say it, but they implied that yeah, they want to get their hooks into a client and make it so that it is difficult for the client to switch. Whereas instead of doing the opposite of helping upskill them so that they can own it so that you can solve other problems, it always felt backwards to me. I always
Yeah.
felt like the more I worked myself out of a job, the more someone would want to work with me. And that's why I've always felt like I was missing something. I'm like, it can't be as easy as I think it is.
But it is, and I think that when that's not the case, it often tells a lot of how companies see the value of what it is they're offering, whether it's a platform or a service or a software. We can talk about agencies or analytics, but this is true across the board. Just look at social media. Elon locked down Twitter, so you can't link to certain websites like newsletter websites or other websites. LinkedIn deprioritizes posts if you link to your own blog or link out, and so that's why you see this like weird thing on LinkedIn where someone will write a post and say, "Oh, if you want to go read the article, it's in the comments," because it's a way to hack around the algorithm that deprioritizes posts that link outward. To me, that's a massive red flag that LinkedIn, that Twitter doesn't trust that their platform has any value, so they have to keep everyone locked into the platform. We can't send them somewhere else because if they leave, they're not going to come back. We have to trick them and force them to stay here. And so we see it all over the place. It's not specific to vendors. We see this mentality across the board in business. And to me, while sure, I mean, there are some logical reasons where it may make sense, but if you're so fearful that someone is going to step outside your ecosystem and never come back, that says way more about your platform than anything else. Because if you're providing value, if you're providing a great experience, it doesn't matter if they run across the street. They're going to come back because they love what they're getting from you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've seen this in the automotive industry. They've made it so that routine maintenance on your car is very, very difficult to do. They talk about 50 years ago, everybody performed the routine maintenance on their own cars, but these days you open up the hood, unless you really, really, really know what you're doing, like they've built them in such a way that it's intimidating, and most people are be like, I don't have the time to invest in doing this. I'm just going to take it back to the dealership for routine service. Like we've seen it happen there.
Have we talked about that before? Because, yeah, so like two extremes. It's one reason why I am gonna like baby my Jeep and take care of it. It is the most amazing thing to take care of. It's so easy. Everything is there and it's like built for someone to maintain that thing. So you're not locked into their ecosystem. But the newer cars, and the reason why I brought this up is I can't remember. I'm not going to name the car. It's a car I no longer own. But the maintenance of just like changing the battery on it was insanely difficult. And I finally asked someone at the dealership, I'm like, why is this so difficult to do? And he said something like, well, we're not really supposed to say this, but one of the strategies is from the manufacturer is that they don't want people messing with their own cars, so they deliberately design them to be difficult to maintain unless you know what you're doing. Like it's a deliberate decision, again, deliberate decision to lock people into the ecosystem.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. I've heard the exact same thing. It is to push you there, and I mean, I even think some vehicles, if you do certain changes or whatever, you void the warranty.
Yeah, yeah.
And I know, like for years, like whenever you've had a lease, like you obviously can't make major modifications to the vehicle. But now it's even if you own it, going in and maintaining it, you void the warranty. Whereas before it was, and I'm talking about the stuff that you could maintain previously.
Yeah. And again, like I love this discussion because I think we can pick almost any aspect of life and we can find examples of this vendor lock-in. And I think in part I can understand it, especially when you're talking about like, OEM parts and you want to ensure that it's going to work, and I get that. But if you're purposefully designing things just to keep people locked in, I think about the printers all the time. Like, the printers now, like, I don't know if you how recent you've bought a printer or purchased a printer, but like you used to be able to buy, a non OEM print cartridge or go to some place to have it refilled. But now they're so sophisticated, you put that in and the printer locks up. You can't even use the printer anymore because it's like, nope, you're not using one of our parts. And I get it, right? Like, I get it on one hand that they want to control the experience, but if you're purposefully manufacturing it to such a degree, because, and I think it's really about the intent. If you're doing it because you're trying to create a great experience with your brand, okay, maybe I can give you a little bit of leeway. But if you're going into it with the intent of locking people in because you want to keep them in the ecosystem because you don't trust the value of your product, it's unethical, and it just screams, is this a product that I want to buy? Are they really that scared that their quality isn't going to keep me locked in their ecosystem? If that's the case, why do I want to be owning this thing? And it's true for services, right? Like, if I'm going to go out and I'm going to partner with a vendor, and I can see that part of their process is to lock me into some system, I should be asking myself, are they really that scared that I'm not going to appreciate the value and the quality of their product that they have to lock me into some, system that they've put in place where I can't go into my own platform and change the rules and write my own code? I should be worried, you know?
So you bring up a good point there. So when, say, evaluating, and let's stay very, very focused, agencies in the martech and digital analytics space. If you're evaluating agencies, are there any telltale signs that you would see right out of the gate that could help clue you in that this is an agency that does this, or is it sometimes like things you just need to keep an eye on and make sure that like it's not this slow creep toward it?
I mean, I think it's the latter because I don't think agencies are going to come out and tell you during the sales process, oh, by the way, we have this, unique design to our system where once you're onboarded, you can get in, but you ain't getting back out. Like, they're not going to tell you that, right? And
No, and I
so,
didn't think they would say that, but like, is there maybe other
yeah,
tells that it's like, ooh, like I'm concerned about that?
I think it's difficult to know, other than asking really tough questions around, what are your processes? How do you do this? Can you tell me about a time where it did that? Like, you have to get a good sense for it. But as far as a tell, I don't know. Um, don't do an RFP. Like, again, like, I've been railing on RFPs, but RFP is a great way to select a vendor that's going to lock you in, because
How so?
well, they're cold, they're clinical, and what they're doing is they're not allowing you to connect with your vendor on a human level to really get a sense of their ethics, of their values. So when you're completing an RFP, like, you've set these really strict rules for how you can communicate, and you're communicating primarily through this vehicle that's this document format that they've created. And so you're evaluating your match with a vendor based on these responses that have been kind of predetermined to fit within these guardrails. And so you have very, very little ability to have a conversation like you and I are having. This is how you select vendors. This is how you select partners. It's not through some clinical intake form. It's through sitting down and having conversations on a human level to get a sense of, not only what skills Jim brings, but how do you view things? What's your ethos? What's kind of your ethical standards? How do you think about quality? Those things are really, really difficult to get across in a clinical setting like an RFP. But if I'm sitting down and talking with Jim and we're having human to human conversations, I can get a pretty good sense of, are we aligned in how we view things from an ethical perspective.
Okay, so then to flip the question around a bit, like I know you just asked a couple questions, but like, are there specific things that you would bring up, specific topics, specific questions to elicit, like, is this agency really caring about my success, or are they trying to pull me in and get me stuck into their ecosystem.
Tell me about your longest tenured client,
Oh, that's a good one.
right?
Yeah.
Because that's going to tell a story. If you've had a client for 6 years, and let's kind of stick in the analytics space, and you say, what are you doing with this client? And they're like, well, we're kind of just doing the same thing we did 6 years ago. We're kind of just repeating. That's going to tell a very different story of, well, we started off doing A, and we worked ourselves out of a job, and we built this whole team, and then we kind of pivoted and we did this thing over here, and then we kind of went up here and did this other thing. Have them tell you about that client journey. I think that's going to tell you a lot about how they view their relationship with the client. If you see them growing with the client, if you see them leaving a client smarter than how they met them, if you see like them building teams and really mentoring the organization so they can move up and solve bigger and more complex problems, then that tells you they're probably not interested in locking them in. If, on the other hand, you're hearing a story of, well, we haven't really matured much in 6 years and we're kind of just keeping the lights on, and of course they're not going to come out and say it like that, but if you can kind of pick that up from the story that they're really just there kind of as a staff aug and kind of doing the thing and doing the checklist of doing the work, there's a high likelihood that they've built some systems in place to keep them locked in and to secure the job, that they'll keep doing that job, but there's really very little interest in maturing the client, because why would I have to? Why would I need to put in that extra work? We've got them locked into the ecosystem. What's my motivation to try to do bigger and better things with them?
Yeah. And ultimately, why this conversation is important and why this is something critical to think about when you're partnering with an agency, with a technology vendor, is that do they have your long-term success, and therefore seeing your long-term success is, relates to their long-term success. Do they have that in mind, or do they only care about their success, and whether you grow or not is irrelevant?
Yeah, and so I think that's why that's such a powerful question. Like, tell me about your most successful client. Tell me about your longest tenured client. That's going to tell you a lot about where their motivation sits, and it's probably going to tell you a lot about what it's like to engage with them as a vendor. And again, I think it's really important to understand what you're looking to get out of it. If all you're looking to do is to add some additional power to your bench and it's just a part-time employee, you may look at it differently than if it's a, we want to be the most elite that we can and we want to go out and hire the very best analytics coach there is so our team can be the best in the world. Those are kind of two different perspectives. So we're kind of talking about vendor lock-in, but in order to help address that issue up front, we have to know, and I think we've had a couple episodes on this, we have to know why we're buying in the first place. And if we don't know that, it's kind of hard to ask the right questions to determine if this vendor has my best interest in mind or not.
So, we when we started this off, we talked about, one of the pitfalls of this is being so stuck that the cost to switch is enormous.
Yeah.
Whether it be the not just the actual monetary costs of moving vendors and rebuilding, but in knowledge. Like if you are so dependent upon the vendor that you lose knowledge if they leave and whatnot. But tell me, a bit more what you think are like some of the other major problems if you fall into this trap.
So I think one of the biggest ones, and if we kind of look at vendor as far as maybe a platform, one of the biggest ones is ownership. Like, who owns what? Oftentimes when you think about vendor lock-in, the vendor lock-in is to the data. So the thing that is the most valuable, we don't even own. So, whether it's a services company or a software company, if they're making it, if they've designed it in such a way that it's very, very difficult for you to get and have access to the data, should be a huge red flag. That again, like, that's probably engineered for a very specific reason. reason to keep you dependent on their system. If on the other hand they say, look, we want to make it super easy for you to get the data, it's your data. That says a lot about their trust in the value of what it is that they're offering you. And again, this is both on the services and on the software side. So if I'm purchasing a SaaS product and they're making it very difficult for me to get my data, tells me a lot about their trust in the value that they're offering me. If I'm working with a services company and they're manipulating my data, they're munging it, they're cleaning it, and they're whatever, but I don't get to see what the process is and I can't access the data in, or again, that's a huge red flag that this is an agency that wants to own that. And if I leave, then we're out of luck. And we've seen this with lots of companies where they've purchased professional services hours to own kind of that data pipeline. And it's so secretive, it's so unknown that they're locked in that they can't leave. It's like, we can't leave. We have no idea where the data is coming from, where it's going, how it's moving through the pipelines, and how it's coming out. If we in this contract, if we in this maintenance contract with this agency, then basically our pipelines fall apart. Again, it should be a huge red flag. They should be teaching you how these pipelines work, how to maintain them, how to fix them, how to extend them. But if they're not, again, then it's a huge red flag that they're trying to keep you locked in. They see that teaching you what they know is a risk, rather than seeing teaching you what they know as a huge upside.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that that's one of the biggest questions to answer. Are they willing to teach me what they know?
Yeah. And in many ways, like, I do see, this is definitely predatory. You said in many ways it's unethical, but here's where they get you. Like, as we were talking about a few minutes ago, an agency isn't going to tell you that, yep, when we build this for you, you are stuck with us until you're done using whatever we build. They're not going to tell you that. But what it's how it's often done, and where I've seen it, it's disguised as convenience.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's disguised as, we're going to make it easy for you. We'll handle all of it for you. Let us take on the burden of that. And here's the thing is, don't worry about how it works. We'll manage all of that for you. It's going to be seamless for you.
It feels so good as a buyer, right? Because we're so overwhelmed. Our teams are so taxed. And so we have an agency coming in and say, oh, you have Adobe Launch and you're trying to build. Don't worry about it. We got this. In fact, we've got this connector that bolts onto it that makes it so easy. You don't even need to think about it. Don't worry about it. You go do analysis. We'll do this. What they don't see is the fine print that says, oh, by the way, if you end our services contract, we're taking this connector off, which is going to destroy and stop all of your data collection.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was more on like the health and fitness side of things, but it applies here. And the person who was talking, said something that kind of like stuck with me. I've been thinking about it all week. Is convenience and comfort will be your death. When you're not challenging yourself, when you're not pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, if you're not feeling uncomfortable, or in this case, like in the case I was listening to, the case of like being fit, if your workout is comfortable, it's no workout. And in this case, if we apply that same thought process to digital analytics, the convenience can be your death in the case of you're stuck with a vendor. And then, like, think about any business, any industry where there's a level of monopoly or duopoly. The customer service sucks, doesn't it?
Always.
Because they don't have to keep customers happy. There's no other choice. And that's where you have to be very, very careful. There's one thing in this space about having tools that integrate well, that enhance them, that make them better together. It's another thing to have it where it's way too convenient for you and somebody else is managing it, because then you don't own it.
Yeah, and without going too much on a tangent, it's why most of the big consulting agencies and almost all of the agencies that are part of a SaaS vendor are mediocre, or as the kids say, they're mid.
They're mid.
They're mid.
Nice. I'm not up with the current slang. I hear it. I hear some of the current slang, and I'm like, I am not going to be the get off my lawn guy. But I'm like, oh come on, is that the
Well,
best you can come up with some of the slang?
you'll get there because the only reason I'm up on it is because I have an 8-year-old who's up on all the slang.
Well, I mean, I may have a 4-year-old and one on the way, but I also like we're like I'm telling you right now. I'm just gonna say it. Like we're going to be like the older parents at college orientation.
Yeah.
And I've actually set a goal for myself because we're having kids a little bit later in life. I'm like, I need to be as fit as possible so that I'm active into my 70s and whatnot. So, whole other topic. But I've jokingly said, I said we're going to be the good-looking older parents at college orientation.
You're gonna
But
walk
anyway,
into orientation all ripped like Jeff Bezos, shaved head, and be like, let's go.
damn straight. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the vision I've set for myself for 15 years from now.
Yeah.
But where I was going with that is I do have like some nieces and nephews who are right around the 14, 15 age range. So I do hear some of the slang, and I'm like, oh come on, is that the best you can come up with? I know some of the slang when we were kids was bad, but at least it wasn't as bad as this. That's just me. I've just alienated part of our listening audience.
So anyway, these SaaS
Yes.
the vendors.
Please get me back on track.
The SaaS vendors that also have consulting organizations, and then the big name brand, which we all know the name brands. They're mid, and they're mid because they don't have to be elite. They don't have to be great because people are gonna buy their shit because of their name, right? Like how many times have we heard it? Well, there's no one that can consult on Adobe's product as well as Adobe can. It's their own product. This is a mentality a lot of people have.
Yeah. Let me partner with the vendor and their services.
They're
so I
gonna
know-
be the best, and the same holds true for the big agencies. It's like, well, this big agency that's been around for 200 years, of course they're the best. So they get business because of their gravity, because of their name, and that in a lot of cases makes them mid. Again, as the kids say, they're mid because they lack the motivation to be elite because they don't have to be. They get a shit ton of business just because of their name. And so anyway, I can go off on a tangent on that, but that's the reality of what the landscape looks like. But pulling it back to vendor lock-in, it's a very real thing. It's something that we don't see, because we've all fallen for it, right? Like, I didn't think about it buying a new car. Like, I should have been, right? I should have been asking those questions, but it wasn't until I had to change the battery that all of a sudden I discovered, wait a minute, I'm locked into this ecosystem. And so we all know it happens to us, but it happens so subtly that we don't realize it until we're so locked in that it's like, well, what do we do? We've got the sunk cost. And so I think we just need to slow down a little bit, especially in the martech space where, again, I think, it's not the majority, but it's enough that if you haven't run into it, you will, to just slow down a little bit and ask the question, what happens when the battery dies? How easy is it to replace it? We should be asking some of these questions up front just to get a sense of what it's like working with, again, whether this is a service provider, a software vendor, or someone else, to just get a better understanding of what is it like to be in a relationship with them. And, do they have enough trust in their product that they're going to allow me to interact with it, to change my own battery, to take my own data out? Or do they lack trust in the value they're providing and they're purposefully engineering their software and their services to make it incredibly difficult for me to do anything myself because they want me locked into their ecosystem?
Yeah. And I want to add one thing to that. When you're asking those questions, if everything comes back to a convenience factor, well, it's just as easy, bring it to us to do this, or it's just easy, we'll manage that for you, or we you don't have to worry about that, we got that for you as part of the package. That is something that you should think long and hard about.
Yeah, and that's awesome if they do, but the follow-up question is, that is awesome, can you teach me while you do that?
Yes.
And it's something I talk about with every single prospect I talk to. I say, look, if we're not sharing with you what we know, if we're not making you smarter, then we have absolutely failed you. Doesn't matter how good of an implementation we build for you. Doesn't matter what incredible insights that we deliver to you. If we're not sharing our knowledge with you and making you smarter, we've fundamentally failed you.
So yeah, as we start to
Fundamentally.
wrap up, and I think like one of the themes with this is like this is something that happens through just about everything we touch in life, but there's no major red flags. Or at least I mean you could pick up on some things early on that should cause you concern, but there's no major red flags that this is whether intentionally, and most times it is intentional, or unintentionally a partner is going to lead you down this path of being locked into their ecosystem. It's something that happens subtly. So it's okay if you didn't pick up on any issues during the vendor interview process. It's something you need to keep an eye on because it's something that happens over time, and sometimes it even starts with innocuous things. Oh,
Yeah.
let us handle this for you. Let us get that for you, until it's that you are just so dependent upon this partner that I mean, like I think you even said it, you know, a few moments ago, where if you take them out, everything comes crashing down. It's not even like that you could take them out and bring in somebody else, and maybe you know there's the cost of getting them onboarded and involved into the ecosystem. You have to completely start from scratch.
Yeah, and we've kind of batted around. You know, you said what are the red flags? What should you do? I'm going to settle on a really really simple question. Can you show me? Can you teach me? Like you know, you're right. Like these things happen very subtly. Oftentimes, this is very much by design, but through the sales process, as you're engaging with a vendor, I would be consistently asking those questions. Hey, we're going to do this for you. Or, hey, we're going to work on this. Awesome. Can you show me? Can you teach me how that's done? If if they waver, if they say no, if they make it unnecessarily complicated to try to explain it, then that's probably a good indication that they don't want to teach you. They don't want you to know because there's fear that, well, if Jim knows how to do this, then why does Jason need it anymore? And that should be concerning.
Yeah. All right, cool. So as we start to wrap it up, I have one more question for you. Um, what does all of this mean in the context of sustainable analytics?
Well, I think you answered it. You know, if every time we make a switch, we have to start from scratch, that's not very sustainable. You know, it's basically this process where things are built. What was the word we said? They're engineered to be like engineered to like follow, like, you know,
Planned
it's
obsolescence?
yeah, planned obsolescence, right? Like, well, like we have to just throw it away and start from scratch. Like, if we're trying to build a program where it's built on knowledge and value that we're accumulating over time, if we're getting into these systems where we're locked in and the only thing that we can do is throw away and start over, we're basically carving into our foundation every time we make those decisions. So it's really really difficult to build something that's lasting and sustainable if it's built on such a flimsy foundation that it was, you know, bound to be obsolete the minute that you shut off the check that goes to that specific vendor.
Cool. So this has been great, and like we kicked it off, this is not a new topic, and it's not going away anytime soon. It was just there was a few things that have come up over the last couple of weeks. I'm like, we need to talk about this
Yeah, no,
because it's
it's a
definitely
good topic.
something that people don't realize until it's too late.
And these are the conversations I love to have, and I'm sure that I upset some people. I'm sure there's people in other agencies or vendors that don't like me, and that's okay. Um, but we've decided to take a very blunt and transparent approach on how agencies and vendors work. And, you know, we may take it for granted because we see the insides of how these things work, but oftentimes people don't. And to your point, a lot of these tactics are very, very subtle. And so that's why we have these conversations and share. I think it's important for people to know, you know, how these things work so they can make informed decisions. You don't need to work with us, but you need to make a smart, informed decision for yourself. And if you don't know some of these tricks and tactics that are used, you're going to fall victim to it. I know because we all have. We all have at some point in time. And so, the more we know about how these things operate, the better. And if people don't want to talk about them, and if these conversations aren't being had, you know why. Like, it's this trade secret that they don't want getting out. And that's concerning. So if it's a trade secret that no one wants to out, those are things that we should be talking about.
Yeah, and when you talk in terms like that, like it's not lip service. Um, I try to be as transparent as I can with clients, and the particular one where this happened most recently, when I approached him about this, and I said, "This is my concern," and I then followed up with, "Listen, I'm not trying to blow smoke up your ass. I really mean like I want to make sure your team is leveled up so that they can own this." Because I don't want to own this. I want them to be able to own it so that I can then help you solve more complex problems. Because
Absolutely.
none of us are progressing
No.
if we're just continuing to focus on these things.
In the services space, our goal should be to get the people we work with to be at the very top of their game, to be the most elite. And if we're doing things to purposely hold them back from getting elite, we're failing.
Very much so. Cool. Well, let's wrap it up there. Awesome conversation. Thank you much, and we'll talk to everyone later.
See ya.
See ya.